forest lawn in a silver casket. Put golden flowers over my head in a silver basket. Let the drum and bugle corps blow taps while the cannons roar. Let 16 liveried employees pass out souvenirs from the funeral store. I wanna go simply when I go. They'll give me a simple funeral there, I know. With a casket lined in fleece and fireworks going out, rest in peace. Oh, take me when I'm gone to Forest Lawn. Oh, lay me down in Forest Lawn, they understand there. They have a heavenly choir and a military band there. Oh, just put me in their care, I'll find my comfort there. With 16 planes in the last salute, dropping across in a parachute. I wanna go simply when I go. They'll give me a simple funeral there, I know. With 100 strolling strings and topless benches and golden wings. Oh, take me when I'm gone to Forest Lawn. Oh, take me when I'm gone to Forest Lawn.
That was Steve Goldstein.
Oh, thank
you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. My friends, we have gathered here today to remember, honor, and celebrate our brother, our friend, and the Godfather of Graving, Roger Sinclair, as we commit his ashes to their final resting place. It seems right that his ashes be placed here. He loved this mausoleum, and I am told he knew it like the back of his hand. And how perfect that he is to be placed above Hermione Gingold. He will rest atop Hollywood royalty, as well he should, being the Godfather of Graving. Will you join with me in prayer? Loving and most gracious God, thank you for this most amazing day in this beautiful place. Thank you for this special man, Roger. God, we celebrate his life and his continuing presence in our hearts, and we feel your comforting arms about us. Loving God, as we remember that Christ said, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, they shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. We celebrate that for Roger. All pain and struggle is over for him, that he is at perfect peace, the peace that passes all understanding. And so we ask that you enfold us in your strong and gentle arms and fill us with that very peace as we remember and celebrate our friend Roger. In your many names we pray. Amen. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Scott Michaels, who will speak.
I think today is the first time well, a lot of us have been in the Great Mausoleum many, many times, but I think this is the first time that most of us has actually been in this building for the reason it was built. There's a line from the TV show The Munsters, which this reminds me of. Marilyn Munster said to Lily Munster, "Why all the formality, Aunt Lily? It almost seems like the reading of a will." And Lily said, "I'm afraid it's not that happy of an occasion." But look at all of us, an unusual bunch of people we are. When we get together, it's usually a happy occasion. Sometimes we do that in this very building, in these very halls. We all do things differently than one another, but the one thing we have in common, we're fascinated with and respect the dead. People who get it, get it. People that don't get it, really don't get it. Sometimes these halls seem like a second home for us, the beautiful Great Mausoleum. Well, guess what? Roger's moved in. Sometimes we see it coming a mile away. We can talk about it, think about it, assume we're ready for it, but I don't think we're ever really prepared to lose a friend, and we don't like burying one of our own. I met Roger 20 years ago. At the time, I was a tour guide for another company and was friends with an author named Lori Jacobson. She came over to me and grabbed my hand, pulled me while whispering in my ear, "You're not going to believe this guy." And she took me over to Roger. Now, in his hands, he had one of his binders of graved photographs, and he gleefully let me go through it. I was so excited to find these things because, remember, this is before the internet. This is before we all thought we were the only ones. And after that, we got together a few times, and I moved away, but we remained pen pals, using real letters at that time. And I was in a different country, so if I knew I'd be traveling somewhere, I'd write Roger a letter, and he'd write me back saying, well, while you're in Scotland and Glasgow, go visit this place and that thing. And we had a real thing going. I'd photograph them, and I'd send him copies of the photos, and we swapped death certificates like housewives swap recipes. One of the wonderful things about Roger is that he was generous with his information. Some people are really precious about things and hold things so closely to them and guard them like they're the Dead Sea Scrolls. Not Roger. He was a teacher, and we were happy to follow as students. Several times I've been in the depths of some mausoleum or some corner of a cemetery, just about to give up looking for somebody, and I call Roger. And he would phone, he would talk to me, he'd walk me through it on the phone, and in a few minutes I'd be right there where I was supposed to be. When I returned to the U.S., we picked up our friendship, becoming good friends. We lived so close to each other that it was easy for us to get together. Now, the last time I went out with him on a grave hunt was about 3 years ago, and he was as chirpy as he ever was. He kept with us. He kept up with us, scaling up the big hills of Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills, just like he'd been doing for years. God love him, he did it. But he wasn't the same. He was slowing down. But his sense of humor never left him. He'd look at me with all seriousness more than once. "Did you know that Doris Day's sister died?" And I'd say, "You're kidding, I didn't even know she had one." He goes, "Oh yeah, her name was Doodah." It's true. He was always a gentleman, he never swore, he always dressed well, and was always very respectful of others. He sent the best horrible birthday and Christmas cards ever. And my favorite was this one. I brought it because I love this so much. This is the last card I got from Roger, and it's a gingerbread man. And it says here, the gingerbread man says, "There's nothing like a homemade batch of Christmas cookies." I love this, and I will always cherish it. I hope the battery never wears out on this thing. I love him. A story I love, and I don't think he'd mind telling you, and this might come as a shock to some of you, but Roger wore a toupee. I know I'm being Now, when we go out on outings, he would wear one of those floppy safari hats, and he would tie that thing down, and it was not going anywhere. Now, some of you, I always joke with him, I called it his bonnet. Put your bonnet on, Granny. And so some of you know I used to drive a cloth-top Jeep. And one day I was driving with Roger. He was in the seat next to me. Now, it's not as bad as it sounds, but I recently put the cloth top on for the winter, but it wasn't fastened down properly. And he was behind me. I told him, "Don't worry, the roof might fly off. Don't be alarmed, just be prepared." He held his head down with both hands, and he was like, scared to death it was going to fall off. But as we know, Roger had been grave hunting for decades, before most of us even thought about doing it. He was documenting graves and filing them in these binders arranged by cemetery with little biographies on each photograph. He must have had 30 of these things in his house. Whenever we went to a cemetery, I'd follow his lead, and he'd always point out somebody, some obscure person I'd never heard of. And he'd say, I'm just pulling a name out, Lorene Tuttle. He said, "That's Lorene Tuttle." And I said, "Who's Lorene Tuttle?" He goes, "You don't know." He'd be so indignant. He was a very famous character actor. But that was so typical of Roger. When the internet really kicked in, Find a Grave started, the Hollywood Underground began, and that's how most of us in this room met. Roger, his photo books became redundant immediately upon the internet and Find a Grave becoming, all of a sudden his photos were useless. It's like technology had passed him by. All that work that he did. So when all those years of work he put filing these things, and I always said to Roger, don't ever get rid of those binders. I'll take them, it's our heritage. I will guard them, I promise you. Don't get rid of them. So when Roger left Los Angeles, I got those binders. And I had them up in storage in my shop for a couple of years, and I kept thinking, what have I done? What am I going to do with all these boxes? I don't know what to do with these things. So I met a woman at their dinner last year, the dearly departed dinner, and her name was Kathleen Dimple. And Kathleen worked for the Academy. And I wasn't expecting a positive response, but I asked her if the Academy might be interested in these books. And these 10 boxes of newspaper clippings, individual clippings, organized by date, not page, just newspaper clippings like crazy. I said, are you interested? Not thinking anything. A few weeks later, they picked them up. And I'm proud to say that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Science has a Roger Sinclair collection now. Now, Roger's personal life was a mystery to most of us, including myself. He didn't talk much about himself. He was a gentleman, but he was also an enigma. So facts I did learn about Roger from Roger. He claimed he worked for Joan Crawford, sending out autographed photographs for Joan, with all the fan letters, because she was notorious for doing that. He knew Steve McQueen, and was great friends with Thomas Tryon, the writer, who wrote The Other and Harvest Home, and starred in the movie The Cardinal in '63. And he was also friends with John Eric Hexum. There's a balance, an interesting juxtaposition. But did you know that Roger used to be a biker? He was actually a biker, a motorcycle biker up in San Francisco. He belonged to biker clubs, and he went by the name Rod. You'll see at the shop, one of his biker jackets that says President Rod. He was the president of a cycle club. Now, among Roger's things that I found cleaning out his things, helping him cleaning out his things, there was a shield and a mace. I don't know if you remember what a mace is, but it's one of those round balls with spikes on it that they used to use for weapons. And this shield and this mace had the words toolbox written on them. So I asked him what it was, and he told me it was behind a bar called the Toolbox in San Francisco. So when I got home, I did a little Googling, and I found a feature that ran in Life magazine in 1964. It said homosexuality in America. This is 1964. It featured the toolbox, a photograph of the toolbox. That was a regular place for Roger to hang out. And when they closed it down, he got that thing. A photograph of the patrons of the toolbox, a photograph of non-effeminate men. Not the stereotypical swishy gay people that America embraced and loved to mock, but there were these regular guys in a bar, and a lot of people were first exposed to gay people at that time. Now, with Roger's permission, I phoned the Gay and Lesbian Historical Society in San Francisco and told them about this shield and mace. They were thrilled to accept it. And now this part of gay history that Roger was one of the trailblazers for is on display at the museum, the Gay and Lesbian Historical Society of San Francisco, with a little sign that says donated by Roger Sinclair. Now, a few years ago, I was asked at one of the Hollywood Underground dinners to dedicate a tribute to Roger. He was given the Graving Hall of Fame. And he was the first recipient, the Graver of the Year, that's what it was, at the annual Hollywood Underground dinner. And I'll repeat what I said that night. Roger, I'm grateful for all you've done, and all you've shared with me. And with all of us, your trailblazing contribution to our hobby will be your legacy. I hope we do you proud. And there's one thing he always said, people ask him for advice about graving things. And the one thing he always said, if you see a name and it looks familiar, sounds familiar, take a photo anyway, even if you're not sure. So use that advice from now on in memory of Roger Sinclair. Thank you.
And now we're going to hear from another friend. Will you please welcome Karen McHale.
I was driving up here today, and I saw the coffee shop right here on the corner. And they had built all these new condos around it. And I had to smile. Because this coffee shop was old, but it was still classic, like Roger was. And it meant a lot to us because the first time I met Roger was with Kim, and we brought Kelsey and Shelby along. And we were in here. And Kelsey and Shelby were not exactly being good that day. They were toddlers. They were toddlers. Kelsey was still in a stroller. Shelby was just walking. And I had to tie Kelsey up because she was so hyper. And they were in these halls yelling. Kelsey was at the top of her lungs. And Shelby kept looking at the floor and talking to her reflection, and Roger was getting really annoyed. And as only Roger can get annoyed. So we ended up at that coffee shop. And we're eating and we're trying to get the girls to cooperate and not annoy Roger, which is darn near impossible with toddlers. And what does Roger do? Only what Roger can do. He gets up and walks out. Just like this. Without a word. Didn't even say goodbye. And we're like, okay. And Kim's like, he just does that. I'm like, okay. You know, I mean, first time I met this man. I'm going, okay. Is there anything I did? She goes, no. He'll act like it never happened. And sure enough, next time I met him, not a word. He was nice and graceful and just wonderful. And that was Roger. He just has no patience for kids. Roger was so awesome. I loved Roger. He was amazing. He was unique. He was interesting. He was fun. And everybody wanted to be around him. I mean, we all did. We all fought for his attention. I mean, every underground party, every grave hunt, we were all like little children clamoring for his attention. Roger, where's this person? Roger, who's this? Roger, where's this person? Every dinner, everybody surrounded him, wanting to talk to him. I mean, he was one of a kind. And I can't think of anybody here. Look how many people are here. What an amazing guy. And look at, it's not like they're blood relatives here. These are people who genuinely loved him. Wow, when I die, I hope that many people come for me. I mean, let's face it, our family's obligated to come. They have no choice. These are people who wanted to come.
We are his family.
We are his family. We are his family, and look at that. How many people can honestly say that they're this loved? I think it's pretty cool. And I refuse to cry, because number one, he wouldn't want that. He's laughing it up. He thinks this is awesome. Let's face it, driving Forrest Gump crazy? Yeehaw! He wants us to stand here and do the can for the cameras. He's going to be right here, and now we've all got permanent entrance. That's what he wanted. And he was just a lovely man. And I'm so thrilled to call him my friend. You know, I was looking today at a clock I got from one of the dinners that the group presented to me. And Roger presented it to me. And every time I look at the clock, I always remember that moment, and I see Roger's face when he presents me this lovely award and all the jokes that went with it. And I got those great memories. I get to live those great memories in my head again. And that's what we should all do. Always remember what a great guy he was, what a wonderful person he was, how much he influenced us, everything he's done. He led an amazing life. He lived an amazing life. Wow, how cool is that? So, everybody, think about that. Don't cry. Be happy. Remember him with smiles. He was a great guy. He was loved. And we can all, that's what we all want. We want to die happy and loved. Kim went out of her way to make sure he was well taken care of. And she did this out of the goodness of her heart, people. All of us did, but Kim went.
Always, she always did.
She did more than any daughter would do. And she did this out of the goodness of her heart. How many people would do that for somebody? I don't know too many people. Man, I mean, that's a good person. I don't know too many people who do that for somebody else. I mean, to the point of going to his doctor's appointments. I did that for my father and my mother. She did this for Roger. Wow, that's two good human beings. It makes me appreciate that there's still niceness in this world. So, you know, that's what's so great about this. There's goodness in this world, and Roger was a good person, Kim's a good person, look at all of us. We all come out for each other. Isn't that fabulous? I love it. I miss Roger, but you know, I always have him here. And heck, I remember everything he taught me. So, let's all remember Roger and smile. Thanks, guys.
I'd like to thank you all for being here today, all of Roger's friends and family. We are truly his family. Roger didn't have any family, and we're it. I told him we were having a big party in the mausoleum. He told me, I don't want a funeral. I don't want anything. Just put me in there. Nobody's going to come. I said, oh, yes, they are. And we have proof in Rome today. So, let's see if I can get through this. Eccentric, quirky, strange, weird, funny, friendly, warm, and mysterious. Just a few words to describe my friend and my buddy, Roger Bruce Sinclair. Roger's life has become like an onion to me. Cleaning out his home and his personal belongings, I started peeling the layers of that onion. Roger had always kept his life a mystery to us, and I knew some secrets that I promised not to share, and found a lot of interesting things about his life. Roger liked living his life alone. He had many friends, but he chose to live it in a way he wanted to. He didn't like having to live in a nursing home for a short time, and didn't like being told what to do or when to do it. And my biggest battle was just getting him out of bed. Roger had told me that he was adopted and born in Omaha, Nebraska. Upon cleaning out the house, I found his adoption papers. He was born Roy Leon Loeffler, September 19, 1931, in Omaha, Nebraska, to adopted parents Roy George and Nellie Louise. He didn't know who his biological parents were. A week later, while cleaning out his house, I came across a second adoption papers. This was for a Roger Wayne Peterson. Now the info I had was a little confusing, and I found a letter from the state of Nebraska explaining the second adoption. Roger had been trying to get all of his paperwork together to collect his Social Security. So I went the next day to visit Roger just a couple weeks before his passing and asked him about the adoption. I had read the second adoption petition, but I wanted him to tell me. He said his first adoptive mother had passed, and his dad married the maid and took him back to the home. A second family petitioned the court in 1952 for adoption. The document states that Roy and Nellie Loeffler adopted Roger in July 1932. He would have been less than a year old. In December 1944, Nellie passed and George remarried. In 1945, George took his son, now a teenager, to Father Flanagan's Boys Town in Omaha, Nebraska. Boys Town is where he lived and was cared for until he graduated from high school in 1949. Since 1945, his care was left up to Father Flanagan, who baptized him under the name Roy Leon Paul Peter Loeffler. So in March 11, 1952, at the age of 20, Roy became Roger Wayne Peterson to adopted parents James and Ruth Peterson. Roger had told me that this family was somehow related to the Petersons. So you see how I am confused. And as you know, I'm still digging for info. Sadly, by the time I figured out all this, Roger had passed. With my mother's help, who would be able to figure it out, Mama T is one of the best genealogists I know, and Roger died a mystery to all of us. Now, my biggest mystery is why he changed his name to Roger Bruce Sinclair. I have my theories, but I haven't confirmed them yet, but he did tell me that he changed his name in the 60s to become an actor, but it's his legal name now, and still digging to find out why and when he changed it. Most of you know I met Roger in 1988 at a cemetery and shared the same love of finding where the famous are buried. or getting a few feet away from them, as Roger would say. He always hated the phrase cremated to residence, scattered at sea, or just scattered. He always wanted to visit them, and Roger's knowledge of the famous and where they are buried was spot on. He loved the Valentino history of the Lady in Black. Roger asked me many years ago if I would take care of him if anything happened or when the time comes, as he would say. I never broke that promise. He never married or had children, no family whatsoever. Roger told me stories over the year, and some of you can kind of think, yeah. But now while researching his family and cleaning out his belongings, I found a lot of those stories to be true. He was raised in Nebraska and lived in Chicago, San Francisco, and then Los Angeles. He had friends all over the place and had quite a social life to boot. He worked in the film industry, as many who lived in LA and Hollywood did. He was an extra in the film The Laughing Policeman, and he helped with some film history on some films too. He also worked as a security guard for many years at Universal Studios and Sony, and I found scripts in the house from both of those studios. His last job was at the Wilshire Towers working the graveyard shift, which he loved. He did a walkthrough a few times a night, and he had most of his evening to sit at the security booth and read, cut obituaries out of the paper, and plan his next cemetery visits. Even upon his death, he knew where the famous buried. He asked me about Joan Rivers only weeks before he died. Where do you think she'll go? So I have learned so much more about Roger in the last 2 years than in the 27 years that I've known him. He lived in his LA apartment from 1974 until he moved in 2013 to Hemet to be closer to me. Roger attended celebrity funerals and left me several books of memorial cards from those services. He took some photos when he could, and I have a plant in my work office that he claimed came from Rita Hayworth's service, and I recently found a photo of that plant, and it's still thriving like crazy. One of my favorite stories I love to tell is Roger and our trip to San Fernando Mission Cemetery. I was standing over William Frawley's grave taking a photo. There was 2 or 3 services taking place, and just as a military service does with a 21-gun salute, Roger threw himself on the ground screaming, "I've been shot!" Heads whipped around at the service that were the closest to us, and I hightailed her back to the car because he was laughing hysterically. And Eden, the same day, I'm taking a photo and he yells again, so this time I think he fell in a hole. So I turn around and he's doing a little dance because he found somebody. He did the same little dance when he found actor Brad Davis and many others. The last time we went graving was at Palms Memorial in Las Vegas. He remembered where several graves were, and he had only been there quite a few years before. And it just amazed me, the memory of how he remembered where people were. Once Roger's health was starting to decline, and he had to quit working at the age of 80, he moved to Hemet to be closer to me and my family. Excuse me. I tried to keep his spirits up and keep him busy. He had to give up his car, and I got him a pass for the Dial ride. You know you can pay $9 round trip to go to the Saboa Casino, which is closest to our house. He loved the casinos, and we found the bus trips that took us to Valley View and Harris and San Diego, and I even rode the bus a few times with him for a day of gambling. That man could turn $20 into $200 in a heartbeat. He was always trying to get me to leave money at the nursing home so Karen Fogarty could take him to the casino. Ron and I and the girls spent more time with Roger, dinner at our homes, casino trips, and Ron got him tickets to the Ramona pageant in Hemet. Roger had wanted to go since he had heard that it was in Hemet, and that was one of the things on his bucket list. We had trips to Palm Springs, Fallbrook, Lawrence Welk Resort, several cemeteries, and lots of casinos. And he had his last trip to Disneyland with my friends Richard, Scott, Steve, Julie, and Lance. He seemed out of sorts and not happy about going, but he begged me to get him a spot for the parade. I was cracking up as he waved at everybody on the float. We tried to visit many of the casinos out in my area. We took his last trip to Vegas together. He saw Liberace's home for the last time. We tried to tour the museum at the Cosmopolitan, but sadly it was closed. We visited several cemeteries. We went to the Pawn Stars shop. We saw some of the new hotels, went to Madame Tussauds and the Paris Eiffel Tower. I love spending time in Vegas with Roger, and he spent many days and many New Year's Eve there. He just loved that town, but sadly he knew that was his last trip. Roger was diagnosed with cancer in July of 2013. He had surgery to remove a facial tumor, so cancer treatments began, and back and forth up the 10 freeway to Kaiser. By January, he was cancer-free, but he had facial paralysis, so plastic surgery began, and there were several. During radiation treatments, a feeding tube was inserted, and he relied on that feeding tube. All of his doctors and myself begged him to eat, and he refused time and time again, stating it was just easier for the feeding tube. Roger was one stubborn fool, but he did it his way. He knew he was going to need more and more help, and I could only be there so much, and I was his primary caregiver for the last couple of years. He blamed the doctors for the cancer and what they had done to his face. We spent time laughing and crying, and me telling him it was going to be okay. At times he would joke with me about our future trips somewhere, and I was always telling him we had more casinos to visit. Roger had many friends, Scott Michaels and Troy. Karen Fogarty was there for him, and Karen would call him daily on her rides home, call him daily on her drive home. Some days he was down, but most days he was cracking jokes and telling stories, and I know Karen misses her talks with him. Scott and Troy came to visit, as well as Karen. Karen was there for me from time to time, helping clean and pack up his home. Ron did so much for Roger, hauling boxes, cleaning, and helping me get the house cleaned out. Ron would have done anything to help Roger. Wendy came to visit, as well as Robin Longfellow. I could not watch my friends suffer. I chose not to be there at the end, and I couldn't watch him die. Roger spent most of his life alone, and I really think he chose to die alone. The last conversation I had with him was at the hospital. I settled into a chair, and I was going to be there for him, even if it was all night. We were waiting on results of his test, and he told me to go home. I told him no. I was waiting, and he said, no, you go home. You have to go to work. Go home, I'm tired. So I told him I loved him, and I'd be back tomorrow afternoon. But by the time I came back the next day, he was already out of it. I knew he was there. He looked at me, and he couldn't speak. The doctors gave the news that the cancer was in his lung, and his lung had collapsed, and there was nothing he could do. The doctor said to place him on hospice, and that they would take care of his needs and pain until he passed. The hardest thing I ever had to do was sign those hospice papers. But he had asked me to take care of him. This was his choice, and he gave me the power to speak for him. They moved him back to the nursing home, and the hospice nurses couldn't have been nicer. They called me with updates. I visited every day for several days, but by Wednesday I couldn't go back and see the shell of him that was left. I knew he had already gone to wherever he was going, and this was just his shell. I'm thankful for my friends, family and friends. I was at my mom's the morning I got the call at 7 a.m. I knew the minute the phone rang he was gone. And I thank God my mom was there for me. I called Scott, and then Karen, and then my family to tell him he had passed. Hospice knew to call my work and our crematory county to get him, so I felt at peace with it because I felt at peace with it, but I knew I was going to miss him. I finally got time to spend with him. I moved in closer, and now he was gone. Roger's religious beliefs are murky. But for a man who was too religious, he had tons of rosaries and crosses in his home. Karen and I I wanted him to have as much spiritual and religion that we could give him. So I went and took rosaries and crosses and placed them around the bed. I had a chaplain come in and pray for him, and once I found out he was baptized Catholic, I had the hospice send a priest in for the last rites. I had worked a day called the Our Lady of Guadalupe Day at my former job. I had plastic rosaries at the house. They were glow in the dark. Karen and I joked about putting them around the bed, but I was afraid I'd scare the crap out of the nurses. But Roger would have loved that. Monday morning after Roger passed, I was leaving for work. I locked the front door, and there was Roger's geranium he had asked Ron to take care of. It had a beautiful red bloom on it. I started crying, because to me this was a sign that he was saying, I've made it on the other side and I'm going to be okay. Later that week, someone posted on Facebook the anniversary of John Eric Hexam. Roger just loved John. And lo and behold, the day that Roger passed was the same day that John passed, October 18th. Per his request, Roger had wanted to be placed in the science care program for anatomical research. They brought him back to the crematory, and he was cremated on October 31st, Halloween, his favorite holiday. As I promised, I had him cremated, and I am here to bring him home to the niche he loved, along with all the actors and actresses that he loved. I promised him I would take care of him, and I did. He didn't want a funeral. He said no one would show up. But I proved him wrong. I told him everyone that wanted to come would be here in a place that he truly loved. So today, after 3 months of Roger hanging out at my house, I have brought him home to his final resting place. He's happy, I know. I've seen signs all around me. He truly believed there was nowhere else to go after you passed. And I told him, yes, there was. My faith tells me that I will see you and my loved ones again. So I told him, I will see you again someday. No matter anyone's doubt of my friendship or loyalty to Roger, I did love him like he was my family, and he was my family. He was funny and witty and knew I loved him, and I was there for him. He told me he was the family he needed, and that I was always there for him. He loved my girls to death, would see them and saw them from birth to his death. He loved Ron, and he loved Scott like a son. Scott did help out a lot of his needs when he lived in Los Angeles, and Scott was there for me when we packed up his house in LA. Lisa Burks told me, as she was at her going away party when she said goodbye, he told her he knew that was the last time he was going to see her. He loved Lisa and all his great friends. So thank you to all of Roger's friends for being here today. I told him we were having a big party in the Great Mausoleum, so no one was keeping us out, not even Michael Jackson. So Roger, one last word to you. I love you, I miss you, I know we'll meet again, and we all love and miss you. And not only is Roger my friend and my family, he is our Godfather of Graving. A tour, my friend.
If you will turn your programs over, you'll find the 23rd Psalm. Let us recite it together now. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Let's join together now in prayer. Faithful God, God of all creation, comfort us today with the words of your promise of eternal life as we place the ashes of our dear brother Roger in his final resting place. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes, grant Roger a place of rest and peace, where the world of dust and ashes has no dominion. Confirm in us our belief that he has gone to your light and lives for eternity with you. Grant, too, that he may live on in our hearts. May everything we do and say be a living and loving memorial to our beloved Roger, the Godfather of Graving, and so much more. Amen. And now, my friends, as you go from here, may the peace of God, which is beyond all understanding, keep your hearts and minds in the knowledge and love of God and of his Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.